Yeah. We'll know more tomorrow. The initial, like, there's a lot of support, the assembly, and sending out so much. Realtors are making it.
Hey everybody, we're gonna go get started. Hi everyone. Hey guys, we're gonna get started. Thank you. This was actually a very interesting moment because it's been very quiet. Then right at 6:15, so I hope that means that we have a lot of energy for this topic. Hi, welcome. I'm Erin Anawan. I'm the Town of Rochester Town Supervisor. I want to welcome everyone to this event. Also, I'd like to welcome the members of the public that might be viewing us right now. We are live streaming on our YouTube channel. So this event will be available for people to view currently and also in the future on our YouTube channel. That also means we are requesting some public participation today. So just be aware if there's something you wouldn't want shared on YouTube, I want you to just be aware of that. I just want to welcome you to this. This is our second of two events that we're having on just opening the discussion on housing. Both this event and this topic are near and dear to me. Firstly, this type of structured event where we are sharing data, information, ideas from other communities and giving that to the public as a way of getting more informed feedback, and also requesting that we just hear from the community is something that I've wanted to do since I got involved in the town government 5 years ago. So it's really wonderful that we have a housing advisory committee that is so passionate to spearhead this type of event. And I'm very appreciative that we're doing it. And I'm really excited to see where this can lead and how we can build off of this type of event into other topics. The other way in which this topic is near to me is I'm a business owner, and I've had challenges as a business owner with hiring around housing in our town. And it's not even just hiring necessarily someone who's interested in agriculture and wants to find a place to live near the farm they're working, but it's people who live locally who are getting priced out and having to move farther away and move out of the region, out of the county, or even just 45 minutes away. That cost benefit analysis to workers for a commute time versus, a modest pay scale is the type of calculation that people have to make. And it's something that I've been really aware of. And I think that it's worth addressing, ensuring that our local workforce can afford to live here. So that's an interest that I have just as a business owner. And it's gotten me, that's my personal connection. I was lucky enough to move here at a time when this was an affordable place to live. I bought our starter home, which is hopefully, going to be the home that we're in for the rest of our lives, at a time when we could do that. And now I would not be able to do that with the same home that I have on the income that I have. So I'm very aware. I really hope that we can use whatever tools are appropriate in town government to address this issue. And now I just want to let Charlotte also speak to this, because Charlotte, we refer to as our housing person. Yeah.
Yes, hi, I'm Charlotte Smezek. I'm a councilwoman. This is my 4th year of my term. I was a drafting member to form our housing committee in town. I've lived in town my entire life. I was brought home 2 days old from the hospital to a house in Kerhonkson off of Sampsonville, and I've been a town of Rochester resident. Except for some small stints during college and in relationships, I've lived here my entire life, but I've always lived in Ulster County. And this issue I ran originally back in 2021, and housing was one of the issues I cited for running then. This has been an issue in town since I'd say the mid 2010s at least. I mean, there's always been an issue with housing, and with a severe socioeconomic divide in this town of where our incomes lie. Our elementary school has always had a high on it, homeless child population since I went there at Kerhonkson Elementary School. And these are issues that if everything relates back to housing. If you don't have a safe house, you don't have a roof over your head, food in your stomach, hydrated, and you're a child and you're trying to grow and learn, you're not going to be able to grow and learn like another kid who has all of those things and access to them constantly. Housing is the core of that and the start of that. I'm a child of foreclosure in this town. I'm the child of renting and having that rental taken away. My father almost bought a camper before he found one of like the last few apartments for under $1,000 in town in 2021. I luckily married someone who bought a house, but before that I was home sharing, paying $400 a month for a maybe 8x8 room in my friend's house with no private bath, nothing like that. And that's the income, that's what is affordable in this area. We have a high amount of workforce in this area, but not a lot of affordable housing for those sections in town. So it's really important in these open forums, and having this feedback and being able to get this as a board member is like invaluable. I think to me, probably to most other board members, being able to hear from constituents and being able to have a back and forth and have a conversation with you guys instead of only hearing public comment where we can't have a back and forth because of town law. So I appreciate everyone for being here. My housing committee raise their hands who's here from it. I see Claire, Ken, Marty, Claire, thank you guys. These guys have been wonderful. They've only been around for 2.5 years now. I think they're into their 3 years. Thank you, Claire, from a cue card. And yeah, I just super appreciate them, the energy behind it. I work in housing in my 9 to 5, so I work with other housing committees from other counties or other towns in this county. And there's not always the same chutzpah that our housing committee has for trying to get this information and making sure we hear from the people who are affected by this or not, or who are interested in engaging. So thank you all for being here. Super excited for the rest of our event. And thank you for anyone who came to the last one too.
So we are really trying to encourage hearing from you. So we're gonna start off with the icebreaker, and we're gonna go around the room quickly and just tell us what brought you here today. So I'm gonna start on this side of the room this time.
Great. Hi, folks. I'm Adam Bosch. I'm the president and CEO at Hudson Valley Pattern for Progress. We run the region's housing research, planning, and strategy center. Wrote the housing plan for Ulster County, and I'm here to share a little bit about the data that show the housing stress that you're feeling here, not only in the town of Rochester, but in Ulster County more broadly, and hopefully talk about some of the solutions we're seeing other communities in a similar rural context employ to some degree of success across the region.
Hey everybody, my name is James Amenda. I'm a deputy county executive here in Ulster County. My portfolio includes housing as well as human services, a lot of the stuff that touches people directly that the county does. But I've only been doing that for a week and a half. And before that, I'm a decade veteran of HUD as well as some other parts of the federal government. And housing has been a passion of mine for a really long time. And I'm really excited just to hear what everyone in this room has to say and learn how the county can be more collaborative with the town and meet everyone's needs.
So I'm Andy Bukarek, I'm part of the Rochester Democrats. And I was driving here from Esopus this afternoon, and I saw a sign for the looking for a manager for the Stewart store, and it said it would pay what 60 to 75,000. So I did a quick calculation and said, okay, so that's $5,000 a week at 60,000. Or what, $5,000 a month, and so 30% of that would be, what you would normally spend on housing. That person isn't going to be able to find a house anywhere around here, right? That's the problem.
My name's Phil Rose and I live on Stony Kill. I've been there for 30 something years. And was struck after 2020 with the development on the road, and that's pretty much a common experience all over town. With houses being built that were, you know, in the vicinity of $1 million or more. And, you know, started thinking more about how do people afford housing in our town. So I'm interested in that.
I'm Marty Roberge and I'm a committee member, and I'll be talking later about some of the information we've been able to put together.
I'm Zolly Wynn, I'm a member of the town board, and I just want to come and hear what people have to say.
Jeff Gagnon, I'm a resident of Rochester. I operate a company, Rondout Natural Builders. We source many local materials, harvest logs locally, use them for the frames, and use bio-based and earthen and traditional lime and clay plasters. And we're working on a business model to provide kit homes between 250 and probably 600 square foot that we would they would be panelized, made out of hemp and lime, and be a really healthy environment to live in, and we hope to make it as affordable as possible. So.
My name's Judy Swallow. I lived for 21 years in a Friendly Circle in Kerhonkson, which is a circle of 8 cottages on 8 acres, which was a lovely place to live. I'm missing it, of course. And I moved to New Paltz, where I am at the beginning of a climate smart committee. So I'm here to learn and to see what people in New Paltz can do, because there's a big, huge, horrible housing situation there. Everywhere around, but New Paltz with college students and people buying the houses and and anyway, so yeah, I was lucky to live in that little small cottage in a community, which was a great thing. So there are possibilities for living in community.
Becky Collins Brooks. My husband and I have a farm in Eckford. And I'm here. I have the benefit of being someone who grew up here and then moved away and then came back. And while I was away, I witnessed a cataclysm of lack of housing, affordable housing, and the desire to preserve open space in the town where I lived in Massachusetts. And I called home and told my mother, who was on the planning board in another town, I wish you could load up the entire planning board on a bus and drive them here so that you could see what's happening. And that was 30 years ago. And I've watched it happen here. So I'm concerned about how we balance open space with having affordable housing so that our schools aren't empty of children, so that young families can afford to live and work here. It's a big problem, and I think we're at a crisis point.
In the back.
I'm Alana, I'm on the committee.
I'm Aura, I live across the street, I'm a builder. And I'm going to be on the.
Hi, everybody, I'm Claire Wasser, I'm on the committee as well, and I've been living in the area for the last 50 years, been in the town of Rochester for the last 25 years. And I'm really excited to hear from everybody what they have to say.
I'm Charlie Bray. I've lived in the same amount of time as Brad lived there. I'm not on the committee, but I'm really interested in not just I mean, housing is one thing, when you think of housing, but like affordable housing, like I live in, 2,500 square foot home, but I think more of housing as just rentals, where actually people, workforce labor have a place to live. And, I mean, obviously, it's all one, but, I think that, it's not having housing doesn't add to a very vibrant community, where we don't have a mix of people that young and old, that we can all live together. And this seems to be very stagnant, with only a certain type of clientele moving into the area, and with the possibility of only having commercial businesses that cater to that. Go ahead.
Well, Bill called me an outsider. I was raised in Rockland County, but I'm living back out west for 40 some years, and I'm a climate refugee. I can't live in the West anymore. It just is intolerable for me physically. And I was here, hosted by Claire and Charlie, thank you, and looking at affordable housing that might work for me. And it's like, I could say a lot of things and I won't right now because you have your stories, and but I could tell you a lot. I did develop a co-housing community, which was a small community with clustered housing geared to people who were aging, not senior housing per se. And in an area that had been rural, we were building on old farmland that had been, there's a lot of that where I live, it's farmland not being used, there's no water for one thing. So I like the idea of clustering homes, but having open space, and that has been well received in some areas of where I live. But also housing without community to me is not very appealing, so I'm still searching.
I'm Linda Cobley. I've lived in the town of Rochester for more than 45 years. And I have seen a great deal of building, great deal of change in demographic. The aging population has been growing of people who are remaining here, and the young people are not here because jobs are elsewhere. And the smaller homes are being bought up by second home buyers. And I think that I'm probably explaining something that I've seen. I have a small home, and there's been a lot of pressure on me recently to sell. I received cards, people want to buy, and I don't want to move. And I'd love to see what is going on and what can be done to alleviate the pressures. And I agree that a mix of young and old, we need people of all types.
Hi, I'm Wendy Hollander. I've lived in Accord for 16 years now. I have a small business, primarily art and education, and I employ a few people who over the years have tried to get housing here, and it's been very difficult. And so I'm very sympathetic to wanting more affordable housing.
Dave Roberts, I'm a resident in the town of Rochester. I'm on the planning board as well. And I'm here because I think it's really important for community government to figure out ways of expediting process so we can build more, and also think of new ways of accommodating people. First-hand experiences of renter, but I realize that's like going back 12 years when even then it was terrible. So yeah, we need housing really badly, but we need to work together.
My name is Amanda. I am a resident of Accord. I've only been around for about 6 years now. And I'm here tonight because I came to the first session, which was just a huge amount of information. And I probably need to hear that about 12 more times. Which is good as a start, and really interested in hearing everybody's experiences and stories in order to figure out a different way, maybe regenerative co-housing and all of the things that we have the opportunity to change.
Tim Yates, I'm a renter in this town, one of the few, I guess.
Tim's leaving it up to me. I'm Jerry, Tim's landlord, but actually, my wife will tell you he's my savior because I've been here 51 years and grew up in Staten Island and started off 45 years ago as a landlord of a nice little 2-family house that a dear friend talked me into. Hey, people gotta live someplace, and if they're paying you rent, you can get other places, and it kind of worked out. And Tim is respective of that, and just today I dropped off. And by the way, Amanda, you got me beat because I told our dear supervisor that I'd be here today, and I said we could have 10 of these, and I'll be at all 10 of them. Because I think it's a great idea, but you got me beat because I won't come to 12. And I promise, my daughter is gonna be taking over my spot because Lenny works for the county, and I have written proof, right here, documented proof from your agency, as we discussed, Adam.
Yeah.
In which my daughter, 7 years of motor vehicle while she was in high school, God bless her, she couldn't afford even rent here. And so this is really near and dear to my heart. By the way, some of the things that I know it came up with Jill, who was it, already on the, earlier from Long Island. The Airbnb situation, I have no interest in it whatsoever. I'm not an innkeeper. Tim's been with what did we say, over 3 years, Tim?
Yeah.
And up until that weekend that he came down, he's a forester for the state, DEC. And I guess he just didn't know that you're not just gonna find someplace on, what was it, New Year's weekend?
It's Christmas week.
Yeah, and I'm good friends with his boss, who's right up the road. And I said, just tell him to bring a pillow and everything else will be in that place, because he just lucked out, it's empty. And wasn't looking to rent it immediately, but I'm real glad we found each other. And I really think that's the gist of what we need to start. You just said about community. This needs to get back to being a community. We need to have hundreds of people in here. That's our community. And we need to understand, we all need to work together, because I want this community to thrive. And that's why 20 years this year, look it up, I'm volunteering for the town as the emergency management director. And this is an emergency. I'm here because this is now part of it, my job. And but today I just put in to try to get Tim into something, in the way of a nice new double wide. Because my daughter had a promise, she's graduating college here in a couple of weeks. And she's looking for that place that I didn't know when I built it in '85, a little log cabin. That I have a family member that is gonna go there. I hope they stay on here. That's gonna be the problem. My wife and daughter staying here when I'm not here anymore. That's gonna be a lot of our problems, is not just where we're gonna stay, but how is our family gonna be here to help us out? But I appreciate Tim. I think Tim appreciates, I hope he appreciates me being a landlord. He can say something now because he knows I can't hear, and I do not have eyes in the back of my head. So Tim, you could give him the sign of how good I am. But thank you guys for doing this. Thank you for taking the time to do it.
Ken, I'm a member of the committee. I've lived here for, we moved from Gardner 45 years ago. And before that, I lived in other towns in the county. That's it.
In the back? Would either of you two like to share? You're okay?
Would you like to share, sir? You're okay. Awesome. All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. And welcome again. And we're gonna go to our further. Yeah, so Adam kind of did a lovely introduction, or Marty.
Yeah, Marty was gonna do it.
So Marty, do you want to introduce Adam for us?
I'm sorry.
Were you introducing Adam for us?
Yeah.
Oh,
You don't have to.
I was gonna say, Adam kind of introduced himself,
I'm okay.
when
It's
he
fine.
gave his reasoning for being here, but, please welcome Adam
Yeah.
Bosch from.
Hey, Jan.
yeah, hi,
Say
Jan.
what's
Hi,
up,
Jan. Oh, yes,
Jan.
hi, Jan.
Don't forget Jan.
Yeah.
Jan looks lonely. It's all right, Jan. We'll get to you.
That's not what I wanted. Let's see here. What did I do the last time? Bruce Lee's. It was the.
This is not up to the same level.
Maybe I can log on.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what.
So that's an added triple, that would three months. There you go.
And then I'm gonna do screen share.
Yeah, and I'll steal that.
Oh, I have to do the screen share.
Oh, while she's doing that, I'll mention two things. Someone mentioned, this nice lady right here mentioned conservation and housing and balancing the two. If anyone's interested, there's not a lot of room left, but Pattern is the fiscal sponsor for a group called the Hudson Valley Alliance for Housing and Conservation. They're having an open house and a tour in Kingston on June 6th to look at how the city of Kingston is pairing up housing and conservation. We're gonna sort of be playing co-host. There's gonna be a lot of talk about the way that we're bringing that concept, right? Because good communities have an ample supply of preserved lands to grow food, protect water, have recreation, and an ample supply of affordable housing. Healthy communities don't look at those two things as being mutually exclusive, but they look at them as two important ingredients in a healthy community overall. So we're doing that on June 6th. And I'll just mention while I'm here, tomorrow we're releasing a new report that we did in collaboration with a group of really talented students from NYU, relevant to this town because it's all about how small and medium-sized communities can actually get more state and federal grants for the things that they need to do in their towns. And that report that we're issuing tomorrow with NYU, very relevant to places like the town of Rochester. So I'm gonna try to zip through this at a lightning pace. I'm not gonna talk about what the heck we are, other than say Pattern for Progress is an organization that's existed for 60 years here in the Hudson Valley. We are the region's nonprofit research and regional planning organization. We were founded by the region's academic, business, government, and nonprofit leaders. And we run something called the Center for Housing Solutions, which is the region's research organization on topics related to housing. We also design housing policy, do housing education, do housing planning. Here in Ulster County, we wrote the county's housing action plan, followed up by designing the Ulster County Housing Smart Communities Initiative. And you can see we've done a bunch of other stuff related to housing over the past about 15 years that we've been running this center, including a bunch of different reports annually that look at housing from different angles, including Out of Reach, which will come out again this July, which is our annual assessment of housing availability and affordability in the region. And one that's particularly relevant here in Ulster County, a report we issued called When Hotels Become Home, because we've seen these forces that everyone talked about as we went around the circle, that modest rentals are disappearing, that renter wages are stagnating, that affordability is becoming more challenged. Well, here in Ulster County, that's resulted in more working families living on public assistance in hotels. And it's a real acute crisis here in Ulster County. That's considered temporary emergency housing. Really meant to be a place where people stay for a month or two or a week or two. The average length of stay here in Ulster County for a family living in a hotel is 2.5 years. So it's just another sort of symbol or a symptom of the depth of the housing challenge that we have here in the county. All right, real quick on the data, okay? You can see here what's happened to median housing prices in the 9 counties served by Pattern. The box in green here is Ulster County. Our median home price right now, $440,000. That's up 77% from just 5 or 6 years ago. here in the town of Rochester, your median price last year was $577,000. Now, that statistically means that if you don't own a home now, you really don't have a chance of owning one anytime soon. That sounds like something you'd put on a bumper sticker and a flyer, but it's actually a mathematical statistical fact, okay? Here's a quick chart. This shows the first 3 bars are the maximum amount of mortgage that a 1-person household, 2-person household, and a 4-person household would qualify for if they went down to Rondout Savings or Ulster Savings or Hudson Valley Federal Credit Union today with a perfect credit rating, okay? The 4th bar is the amount of mortgage they would have to qualify for to buy the typically priced home in the county right now. The gap that we care about most is the gap between bars 2 and 4, because bar 2, the 2-family household, is your traditional first-time home buying household that's trying to ascend into home ownership, get on that first rung on the ladder of home ownership. And this is the gap between where they are and where they need to get to, okay? Across the region, that gap is somewhere between $99,000 and $280,000. I think here in Ulster, it's hanging out around $150,000, $160,000, something like that. So the gap is gigantic. Anyone who doesn't have home ownership now is really strained to even think about trying to achieve it. As a consequence, we have this whole big proportion of the middle class that traditionally would have gotten up into home ownership. Now they can't reach it and they're in the rental market, okay? For longer and perhaps forever. Now, I always say there's nothing wrong with that in the sense that my parents never owned a home. They frankly had no interest in owning a home, okay? But for those who want to and can, it means that we have just a greater quantity of people arm wrestling over limited rental capacity. And what that results in is it results in a market where rents are increasing very rapidly, but we see renter wages really stagnating, okay? And that's been the case now for the past 10 to 15 years in this region, where rent has gone up at roughly twice the proportion as renter wages for many, many years. So if rent went up 8%, renter wages went up 3 or 4%. And now what we're seeing with a growing retirement wave among the baby boomer generation is we're actually seeing rents go up and wages remain flat. We're actually backslide because a lot of people, when they retire, see their income go down modestly if they're going from living on a salary to living on Social Security. So that's why you see some of these wage changes actually in the negatives. That's a sign that this growing wave, this building wave of retirements among the baby boomers are starting to affect the renter wages as they move out of being homeowners, okay? I'm not gonna go through this. Let's just suffice to say that right now, the typical renter in Ulster County, the average renter making average renter wages makes about 38% of the area median income. This is important for those of you who are in the room, who are on the committee, who might have discussions about designing local policies related to incentive zoning that require developers to build units at a certain level of affordability. Most communities set that at 80% and pat themselves on the back. Some try to dig deeper and hit 60%. That's really hard right now for developers to actually pencil out and build. But the demand in the region is much lower than that because, again, we've seen wages go up among the homeownership class, and we've had a lot of wealth moved into the region, but renter wages have stagnated. So for those who like math, the denominator is going up rapidly, but the numerator is flat. And so we're seeing that that's resulting in the demand in the AMI dropping a lot. I'm not going to go through this. I'm going to be very selective here. Important to understand what happened during the pandemic, right? I mentioned last time I was here that the seeds of this crisis were planted back in 2008, okay? And it was already starting before then, but the seeds of the crisis we have now were planted by the Great Recession when 2 things happened. Number one thing, and I'll talk about this when I talk about some of your solutions in a minute. The number one thing that happened during the Great Recession is all the small builders we had in this region who were building homes went out of business. And they went and got different day jobs, okay? So we have lost, one of the things you're gonna have to wrestle with in this town is when you come up with a good plan, who the heck's gonna build the thing? Because there are just not as many builders as we had 15, 20 years back. The second thing that happened back during the Great Recession, everyone, I said this last time, everyone remember the Merriam-Webster Word of the Year from 2009? No, you're not nerds like me. it was staycation. Okay, so a heck of a lot of people stopped getting on airplanes because the economy was bad. They drove north until they found somewhere beautiful to hang out, and we were it. So you had all these people with means driving up and rediscovering the Catskills, rediscovering the Gumps, rediscovering the Delaware Valley, the Hudson Valley, and a lot of them bought homes here. And that trend was given rocket fuel by the pandemic when that happened in greater and greater numbers. And you can see here, we gained about 2,000 new residents to more people moving into our county than out of it. So that's not a huge number. What changed during the pandemic was not the number of us, it was the constitution of us, right? We are now a county that proportionally is much more New York City metro area expats than ever before. And we lost a lot of folks who had lived around here for a long time, who moved predominantly to the neighboring counties in the neighboring states, and secondarily south and west, mostly south at this point. The western movement has really petered out. I'm not going to go through this, but I am just going to highlight this piece right here. Important to understand that we've really experienced gentrification at the speed of light. I said last time in this room, I don't say that word as a dirty word. A little gentrification is good. People coming with disposable income to spend in local businesses, starting their own local business, that's good stuff, right? But when you have a gap of 50, 60, 70, or up in Columbia County, $100,000 between the people moving in making $60,000 more than the people moving out, you are changing the market very, very rapidly in a way that leaves a segment of the population behind when it comes to their ability to find and obtain housing that meets their budget, okay? In Ulster County, the heart of the pandemic, we saw a $50,000 to $60,000 gap between the wages of people moving in and the people moving out, okay? A couple other quick things here. I want to just underscore for you, this is very, very important to understand. The main driver for housing demand in the region right now, and those of you who were here last time will remember this, it is not population growth. I repeat, it is not population growth. This region has been a region of 2.5 million people for the past 30 years. We are flat when it comes to population. But what we have is we have a rapidly and steadily shrinking size of the average household. When you have a flat population and the average size of the household is shrinking, demand for housing skyrockets. And I'm just going to really quickly give you the math on this that I always use. If the town of Rochester had a population of 100 people 10 years ago and all the households were in 5 people, you need how many homes? 20, right? Now, fast forward 10 years, your population is still 100, but now all the households have shrunk to be 4. Now you need 5 more homes to house that same population, even though you didn't grow by a single person. We are seeing that on an absolutely massive scale. Now, you're a relatively small town in the region. You have about 7,300 people. Your population has really not changed since 2010 numerically. But look what happened to the average size of your household. You dropped by almost a quarter of a person. And what that's done is it means that you need 300 additional homes of some kind just to house the same size population that you had 13, 14 years ago. That is the major driver regionally, because you exist in a region, regionally of the demand for housing and our inability to keep up with that household formation that is not driven by population growth. Okay, very important to understand that. I'm not going to go through this other than to say there's lots of tools out there. Here in Ulster County, we're very fortunate. We're probably the second most aggressive county in the Hudson Valley on housing, and we might even be the most aggressive if you don't want to count Westchester County and some of the things they're doing in Westchester County, which is kind of its own ecosystem. But we're the only ones that really truly have a housing trust fund that has a source of financing to replenish it on a regular basis. We have the Housing Smart Communities Initiative. We're using former county-owned properties to build housing. We're doing all kinds of smart and aggressive things here at the county level and to some degree the local level, with Kingston going to a form-based code, with 12 or so towns signing up and creating committees like this and looking at their zoning and doing smart things. We're on our way. The thing is, anything you do now you don't see it in the ground until 5 to 6 years from now. And that's the reality of it, okay? So we have to treat this like an emergency and act like we're in one, because the evidence of our actions on the ground take a little time to show up. Real quick, what's going on in Rochester? I mentioned the population is flat. You are very deeply experiencing the regional youth crunch. Your youth population has shrunk rapidly. Your school enrollment here is down 27%. You're down about 620 kids from where you were 10, 15 years ago. Your senior population is up. Households with kids are actually up, but the number of kids is down, right? So I always say my family's a good example. My dad was 1 of 4. I'm 1 of 2. My son is 1 and done because my wife said we ain't doing that again. Okay, so that's what's happening across the region, right? The other thing, and this affects your housing availability, look what's happened to your work from home population. Your work from home population here in Rochester has nearly tripled. Those people ain't working in jobs here in Rochester. They're not working in jobs in Kingston. Those are generally New York City, New Jersey, have jobs in New York City and New Jersey that pay well and allow them to work remotely 4 days a week, 3 days a week, maybe 5 days a week. And they're gobbling up houses at more than the asking price and pushing up the cost of homes. So this is a new, right? This is a relatively new phenomenon that's growing, okay? Current housing units, you got about 3,100. 84% of your households own their home, about 87% of your population. You have about 508 households that are renters, about 16%. You do have a large number of homes that the census counts them as vacant or seasonal. They're probably second homes, seasonal homes, short-term rentals fall into this category, right? That's a pretty substantial proportional number per town. It's not the worst we see by any means. You go up to Tannersville or some places like that, and it's like you couldn't even believe the proportion of the total housing stock that's in short-term rental. This cannot be true. The data say your median rent is $1,153. I just frankly don't believe that because every single listing we can find in your town is between $1,500 and yes, there is a $9,500 a month rent currently listed in your town. Cost burden among renters, right? This is people paying more than 30% of their income toward their housing costs, has risen recently from 53% of your renters to 63%. And right, goes on and on. I think that it's a little covered by Jan here, but I think the thing that I mentioned last time that kind of surprised everybody, your town is perfectly split 50-50 between people who live here that arrived before 2010 and after 2010, right? Really important to understand. This is not like a town of good old boys. You're like pretty well split between people who've been here a long time and people who just landed, right? So important just to understand that as you're starting these civic conversations about needs. As I mentioned, a Rochester resident must make approximately $72,000 to afford a 2-bedroom apartment at FMR fair market rent in this town. That is the 40th percentile of all units rented in the past 20 years. So understand FMR is never average rent, it's never median rent, it's just below that, right? So average rent is higher than that. So you're probably talking someone has to actually make 76, maybe 78,000 to afford what would be the typical rent in town. I want to get to some of these other, solution type stuff. Okay, I'm going to go off script and just end my time by saying this. I know you guys are talking about community housing fund. We were just talking about this in a second ago. I just want to say, be careful. Don't put all your eggs in that basket. You need state enabling legislation to even be allowed to do a community housing fund. And right now, the state of play in Albany is very mixed. There are powerful lobbying forces pushing back against it. It's popular among lawmakers. The Senate staff is really not in favor of it because they don't like passing down new taxing authorities to local governments. So I would not, as I sit here today, guarantee you that that is a tool the state is going to put in your hand this year or next year or for a number of years. There is some momentum behind it, but it's by no means a guarantee that you're going to be permitted to have a community housing fund anytime soon. So I would not play with a tool you don't have or like put all your eggs in that basket, okay? The other thing I would say about a community housing fund is remember that 0.5% real estate transfer tax is only based that 0.5%, excuse me, 0.5% is only based on the proportion of the sale that's over the median price. There is some evidence now that we're doing what's called cresting the hill, which is that prices are getting ready to come back down modestly. which means the total proportion of sales in your town that are gonna be over the median price is gonna get smaller and smaller and smaller. And therefore, the amount of money you're gonna be able to raise through that mechanism is gonna be less and less and less. So that could be a difficult tool to be depending on at this moment in time because you don't even have that tool yet, okay? I mentioned builders and developers. One of the things that we're working on a housing plan for a small town in Columbia County right now is we've started to talk to them about, hey, if you get your zoning right, if you have a plan, who's gonna come build this stuff? Right? Because as I mentioned, the number of developers, the number of small town builders who are building duplexes or triplexes is essentially almost zero at this point, right? In fact, I was talking to a bunch of communities in Sullivan County. Yeah, we know one guy. Well, one guy used to be like 10 companies, right? So I think it would behoove you to have some developers in, nonprofit developers, small developers, for-profit developers, a real, panorama of developers to talk about how they make decisions in the current fiscal environment about where they build, what they build, how they choose where they're going. And I think that would be very illuminating for you to hear it from their mouths. What does it take for them to even recognize a place like Rochester as a place they might even look at, right? Very, very important. Last thing, if I'm you guys and I'm thinking about tools, certainly I'm sure you've been talking about zoning. It's the most powerful tool you have in your hand. It doesn't require, it requires stuff, but it allows it can entice, right? It can set the stage. If you make investment ready sites by investing some time in upfront environmental studies, you can make sites investment ready that are then very attractive to developers. I would look at infill opportunities in town. If there are businesses that have big parking lots that are underutilized, you go to that business and say, hey, we're willing to do a variance. If you want to put some housing in that underutilized space and diversify your revenue portfolio that way, it's a strategy that you could pursue with some of your businesses in town. Some towns, some have a taste for this, some don't, get very aggressive about dilapidated properties that are not occupied. And it's not fun to do. The code allows you to do it. You can gain control of some of those properties in interesting legal ways, and then you have them as chess pieces in your hand. Again, not everyone has the stomach for it, the staff for it, but we've seen some places do that in a rural context with some success. So I know you're thinking about sites, I know you're thinking about strategies. Happy to talk about those. I would say in this town, you also have, I don't know if it's the third rail to talk about it, but whatever's gonna happen with the old Granite being up for sale, I think should be the number one topic of interest in this town. I'll end with saying we did a report on adaptive reuse strategies for dead resorts and dead shopping malls. We really dug into the information of communities across the country that have gotten this right, that have been aggressive, that have been smart, and the way that they've pursued that through master development plans and agreements and zoning and other things. And as we look out at the landscape, whether it's the Nevele or the old Granite or some of the ones up in Sullivan County, or some of the dead malls we have, like the one in Kingston that's just sitting there, soon to be rotting away as it loses its very last tenants. There's some real opportunities there, but you got to be smart and aggressive and on top of the ownership chain and what they're doing.
We have time for like one or two questions for Adam.
Yes, ma'am.
My question is, I want to go back to the real estate transfer tax and your that's a pretty bold statement to say that Albany, we don't have it and Albany doesn't want it or is reticent to have to implement that.
Yep.
I am personally not in love with taxes. I don't know anybody who really loves it. But we need to do something. And that seems like a very proactive step to take.
Yep.
It's a tool that is available and in our toolbox. So I'm curious what the reticence is. If you could elaborate on that just a little.
Yeah,
bit.
so it's not in your toolbox yet until the state gives it to you. The state has to pass enabling legislation that allows you to do it, right? And they haven't done that yet. So.
Well, how did Southwold get it?
Because there's only 4 towns in the entire state that were given that tool. They were all on Long Island, and they were all done by an assemblyman who I'm meeting with tomorrow to figure out how he pulled it off. So they're the only 4 towns in the entire state that have been handed that tool by the state legislature through enabling legislation. There's not a single other town in the state that has that tool. So what I'll dig in a little bit on this. The State Realtors Association is very against it and is spending a lot of lobbying time on it. Okay, that's just the fact of the matter. Okay, we're also talking with them tomorrow to get a sense of why that is. And what we've also heard that there's, I don't want to get into like the way the legislature works, but there are staff members that serve the individual chambers of the legislature who have a lot of sway over what reaches the floor for votes and what doesn't. And the staff members in one of the chambers are very against this because they're very loath to give more taxing authority, to have the state pass down more taxing authority to localities as a general principle, not specifically in this instance, but just as a general principle. And so it's facing headwinds from that general philosophy, okay? And so the bill's been introduced, right? I know Dee Barrett was the one who introduced it in the Assembly. There's some co-sponsors in the Senate. I have a meeting tomorrow with a bunch of people involved in it to get a better sense of, you know, how's it going? Does it have the kind of momentum and support that it needs? There's a lot more support for that than there is for community preservation funds right now. The state essentially said they're not going to be really doing any more of those. You have those, I think you already have that enabling legislation here for Ulster County. But those are the headwinds that I'm talking about. So what I'm saying is it could happen this year. I just wouldn't bet. Yeah.
Thank you, Adam. We were gonna move on, but I think you're gonna hang out.
Yeah, I have to leave at 7:45.
Oh, okay. Do you want to take one more question?
Quick
Okay.
one. I'll be sorry, Jan.
It's okay.
Jan.
So I'm just interested in how you incentivize, and are there examples of how you incentivize developers to produce what you want them to produce? So, for example, you know, I think it's a model here where you could provide 30 medium density houses, you know, on land, but are there examples where towns have actually done all the background work for that? You know, they got it through planning, got it through all the regulatory stuff, and then, but also then provided like a financial modeling for that. Okay, 30 units, this is your cost and all that sort of thing. Can you
So
speak to that?
without getting into a lot of detail, because that's a pretty complicated question, I'll say there's a lot of different paths communities have taken. For communities that actually control a property, they've sometimes more or less sold that property for $1 or some low cost to a developer, set up the zoning, had like the public input ahead of time so that it's essentially like ready to go, and you're taking the land acquisition costs out of the total cost for development.
Yeah.
And you're reducing the soft costs for going to the planning board for 5 years and things like that,
Yeah.
right? So there's that model. There's also the state is providing more grant funds for site prep stuff and site review stuff that you can do ahead of time to make some of those sites pre-approved, quote unquote. And then it comes down, I know you're on the planning board, it comes down to then, you know, how quickly can the planning board get through those reviews? Yeah, there's other things communities are doing. There's density bonuses. There's all kinds of other tools that communities are using to try to get a project that fits the context of the community and pencils out at the right development costs, that you're getting those units at a level of affordability that's right for your people. As I said last time I was here, right now, that's really difficult because lending rates are still high. You've seen the cost of certain things like HVAC components go up by like 100% in 5 years. And now we have this tariff situation where 70% of the dimensional lumber comes out of Canada, the gypsum board comes out of Mexico, and developers involved in our organization are watching their pricing from their builders go up very rapidly to the point where they can't even get the project financed. So we're in a very difficult situation for building anything.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
Excuse me.
I think
We have time for one.
yeah, but
Maybe.
I did have Adam's information up.
Yeah.
We just have kind of a tight agenda tonight. Thank you. Alana, did you want to introduce?
Hi, Lana.
So we wanted to share examples of a couple of actualized and implemented housing initiatives from other towns in our state that can serve as precedent as we decide as a town which solution would be best suited to our needs. So our first guest joins us from the neighboring Ulster County town of Shandaken. Dan Jaffe is the board president of the Wellington in Pine Hill, located at the base of Bel-Air Mountain. The Wellington is an example of something Adam just mentioned, an adaptive reuse of a forlorn historic building, a former hotel in the heart of their hamlet that will be revitalized into a mixed-use commercial and residential development. Dan, take it away.
Thanks, Alana. Hi, everybody. I think this builds really well on Adam's presentation, which was a little bit like trying to take a drink from a fire hose, but I think it's such important information to absorb. And I think one of the things about working in housing is that on one hand, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there, and you can just go down one path after another and not know, whether it really pays off. And on the other hand, it's great to have this sort of a sense of what you want to do, what system you want, but focusing too much on the tools before you know which properties you want to see developed can also be a terrible mismatch. And I can tell you a little bit about that from my own experience. I'm not going to go into great detail about how we've developed this property. I'd be happy to, Alana can give you my email. I can give you more information. I want to focus on a few things that you talked about when you went around the room about what you were concerned about. But I did want to tell you that today the National Trust for Historic Preservation named the Wellington Hotel in Pine Hill as one of the 11 most endangered historic places in the United States. Sort of a dubious award, but we're hoping it's going to raise our profile enough to close the financing gap we have for this project, which is 10 units of workforce housing and a grocery store. It's about a $7.5 million project, and we have a gap of about $1.5 million at this point to close in order to start construction. We're half the town of Shandaken is half the size of your town. But we have a lot of the same problems, an aging population, younger people can't find a place to live, businesses aren't open all the time because they don't have the workforce to help them. So a group of us, and I think this is sort of an interesting one road to go, 20 of us in the community when an abandoned, very large historic building on our main street went up for sale. We decided we were either going to buy it or we would end up spending the next 20 years fighting whoever did buy it, who wouldn't be able to develop it. Because that's what we had done for the last 20 years. So remarkably, and it was very much because of some of the dynamics that Adam described of having some younger people who had more income and some people who were born there who really understood the community and its needs, and putting various amounts of money together to buy the property. It was a little crazy, but we did it. And I think one of the lessons from that is just to say, ownership is really important. You really can't do anything if you don't own the property. There's just no way you have to have that control. So what we did was one way of getting that control. So 20 of us formed an LLC and bought the property. It's called a community-based limited liability corporation. There's some small towns in upstate New York who do this all the time. I'd be happy to put you in touch with them if you're interested in it. We just sort of stumbled on it ourselves. We're creating a nonprofit now called Friends of Pine Hill Historic District, and we're going to give the property to the nonprofit to own and manage ultimately. The other thing that you start to learn about is capital stacks. And this is one of the things that makes this work so complicated. There is no one window to go to get your financing, even once you have all your plans and you have your entitlements from the town and you're ready to go. We've got layers and layers of financing. And luckily, as Adam said, the state and the county are very friendly to affordable housing. And we're a food desert. We're putting in a grocery store. We're getting a lot of support from them. But each window is completely, has its own special snowflake. So every time you open a window for financing, you have a completely different set of requirements. You have transaction costs with your lawyer to close on the deal. It's very expensive, but that's the reality of doing this kind of work. It argues for doing larger projects. And so there you inherently have a tension. Our project, which our little hamlet considers very large with 10 units, I mean, it's increasing the rental inventory by 3%. Some people are very upset about it. They think it's too big. It is taking as much time and costs as much to do 10 units of housing as it does to do 100 units of housing. So one of the things that you have to grapple with, and I'm not advocating for 100-unit projects in communities we're in, that's not the right size, but you really do have to grapple with this issue of you're going to spend an enormous amount of time and a lot of soft cost money to build anything. You really got to get the right size. You have to find something that is worth all that effort. We started out thinking we were going to do a hotel kind of arrangement for people who worked, did seasonal work in the community, because we're right at the base of the Bel Air ski area, and we also have a lot of people who work seasonally in the forest, in the Catskill Forest. It was too expensive. The property was just not in such bad shape. There was no way to pencil that out and make that work. Two things about that. One is that it was very disappointing to a lot of people in the community. They kind of liked the idea of the hotel becoming a hotel. They were sort of more comfortable with that. When we also were very aware of the need for permanent workforce housing. It's been, even though everybody in our town, just like your town, talks about housing as a #1 need, when it came to actually doing the housing, it's been very hard to get people to understand this isn't public housing. And even if it was public housing, why is that a problem? So, we needed to spend and have spent an enormous amount of time with our community, really talking about what we're trying to do, how we're trying to do it, how, if you think there's a demand for housing for people whose incomes are lower than the median income, then you can't then get upset because you're building housing for people whose incomes are lower than the median income. And it is a tension, and it comes out in funny ways of people being concerned about increased traffic, which is true. There's going to be more cars on Main Street. But I think it's about change. People have a lot of grief about change, even when they want change. And so part of what we've done, and I think it's worked out really well, is in addition to doing this development, we've been very active in creating a group of people in the town called PH2, which are activists who are trying to show a little love to the town in various ways, whether it's housing or health fixes or working on transportation, so that we all meet every 6 weeks over a potluck dinner and talk to each other about what we're doing and how we're doing it, and talk about the issues in a very candid, informal way. It's a very mixed group of people. They're new people, old people, people of different political persuasions. It makes a difference to have that kind of activity going on at the same time as you're focused on housing. So I guess the other lesson I would say is that beware of becoming too focused on housing and not focused on community. And all of you mentioned that already. It's really important to keep that balance. The other thing I wanted to say before I stop talking is about financing. So I think it was really important that the community put up some of our own money. Some people put up $1,000 and some people put up $50,000. It was quite a range. And we had shares in this LLC. Some people didn't put up any money, but they came to every single cleanup of the building and helped us really just make it look better. Then starting to, having that ownership and having a little equity in the project, I think helped make the county and the state take us more seriously. And what we did was we brought them up to see the property. We said, do you see what we see in this? We really want to know. So we really spent a lot of time in that kind of deep conversation. Someone mentioned this before. I was a planner a long time ago, and I think there used to be these things called charrettes where you would bring together the community and professionals from, different backgrounds, developers, architects, and just walk the town and get together and talk about what each other see. And I think that can be a very useful tool. And we did a modified version of that, of just having people from the Department of State, from the Regional Economic Development Corporation, from the county planning, from county economic development, come visit us. And we just walked around and we showed them the Wellington, we showed them other things. So they became familiar with who we were. We weren't just coming to them with a project and saying, why don't you fund this? It still has taken a long, long time, and we're not there yet. And the other thing that makes me feel convinced that we will be there is that we recognized that we could not do this project without a developer partner. And housing is not by itself a political act. It's not an organizing act. It's a math problem. And you really want people who have done it over and over and over, and they know how to solve all the various iterations of the math problem. We were very lucky, and in the process of bringing people up to say, do you see what we see? We were able to cajole and pester Rupco to come up and see us. We're far away from Kingston. So this was really amazing. They came up. They liked, and I think this is another interesting thing about what we are doing. We felt very strongly that we didn't want to just do housing, affordable housing. We wanted to have something in the building that everybody would get to use on a regular basis. So that was the grocery store, cafe. There's no place to get a cup of coffee in our town. And we wanted to have a grocery store that was both affordable to people who wanted to pick up get groceries day to day, and also was sophisticated enough that it knew how to tap into the skiers and Airbnb people who also, would help float the boat. Because frankly, neither we nor Rochester are big enough to really support a good grocery store with our size. So I'm just looking at my time because I want to stop on time. I've already gone over. I'm going to stop. But I think I'll just say that's what convinced Rupco to join us, is that we had this mixed use property. We were very, that was like we just drew the line on that. We said, we're not going to do the housing without the grocery store. And I think that's also what has kept the community with us throughout this process. There's something in it for everybody. People can be very altruistic about wanting workforce housing for other people, but really they want their cornflakes. And they don't have to get into a car to drive to get them. And that's a good thing. So you need to find something that's for everybody in these projects if you want the buy-in that you're going to need. Okay, now I'll stop.
Jan.
Thank you.
Jan, it's Alana. I have a question about your funding. I know that you guys were granted the Restore New York grants, and that's from the economic development regional, right? So that isn't Rupco. So I also understand that Rupco doesn't take projects on that are less than 30, 50 units. So what funding did you get from Rupco, and what exactly, how did they, why and how did they partner with you?
Yeah.
Small.
There's a couple things in there. We don't have a grant writer in Shandaken. So I said I would write the Restore New York grant with the town. We didn't get it. And then, but then this is another lesson. I think often for these grants, you have to write them multiple times. We're about to do round 3 of New York Forward for Pine Hill. Last year we were finalists, so I think we're inching along. So the second time with Restore New York, we did have a relationship with Rubco. But what happened is that Ulster Economic Development did what it always does, which is it goes to all the towns and says, we could apply for one Restore New York grant. Do you have something that's ready? And our town said yes, and we did it last year and we didn't get it. We'd love it if you did it. So Ulster Economic Development applied for that, for the Restore New York grant for $1.6 million. That was a fabulous partner. They were really fantastic. And we got the grant because they have a long history of getting those grants. Rubco has not put up, Rubco is not doing this project they are not going to be the developer and owner of the project. They're doing it as a turnkey project. The Friends of Pine Hill Historic District is going to own and manage it. That means we're taking that responsibility on. They are developing it. But having Rubco as the developer has opened doors that we would never be able to open ourselves because we don't have the track record and the experience. The projects, the reason for the size of the projects, and this is something else to think about, is that in New York State, if you don't have at least 40 units of housing, you cannot get a low-income housing tax credit. Low-income housing tax credits are a critical part of financing most projects. They're an important source of equity. So we had 10 units, so we couldn't do that. But we did have historic tax credits because the project is on the National Register. So that's a whole other story about the complexity of doing that, but I won't go into it right now. But what Rubco is doing is helping us with, we had enough money to do some of the initial pre-development work, structural analysis, putting out a scope of work for an architect, picking one from 8 architects, doing the initial schematic drawings, and then we ran out of money. And they have, so they are fronting money that we're going to have to repay them at the closure. So they're definitely taking risk in this project.
Hey, Jan, I just got to, before you move on, I just got to double down on a couple parts of the math problem. Jan just went through that. This room really needs to understand. She's got a $7-point-something million project that's going to yield 10 units. Yeah. You back the grocery store out of that, which I'm guessing is like a third of the cost. You're talking about in this region, development costs per unit right now are hovering around $500,000. So, and if you're thinking about community housing fund, start to think about how far that fund can go with per unit costs that are that high. The other thing she mentioned was the capital stack. She mentioned the historic tax credits. It is the truth in this region right now that developers need at least 1 or 2 of the big 4 to build anything. The big 4 are low-income housing tax credits that Jan mentioned, historic tax credits, brownfield tax credits, or something akin to the Ulster County Trust Fund, or what we used to have as of last year, the Mid-Hudson Momentum Fund that was operated by ESD. If they don't hit usually at least 2 of those 4, they can't make the math problem work. And that's, what Jan is, I think, underscoring for all of you is important to that.
But I just do want to, because this can just seem so discouraging.
Yeah.
Real estate years are like dog years. They're much longer, or it's the opposite. They're shorter. No, they're longer. So we started this project and we bought this project in December of 2022. We are going to start construction in March of 2026. This is very fast. And so part of it is that you need somebody who's retired and is willing to work 40 hours a week on the project. Really, you have to have somebody who's just going to be the volunteer momentum bunny, because it's just, there are so many hurdles that you really need that kind of crazy focus.
Thanks, Jan. So I think next we're gonna go, we're gonna save the Q&A for at the end after our next presenter. So since we've gotten behind on the schedule a little bit, guys, so I'm gonna let Ken introduce Jill.
I'm going to introduce Jill Doherty, who's visiting us from, and thank you so much for zooming in from one of those towns on eastern Long Island that I had referenced before. I was lucky enough to get in under the state legislation back in 2021. I think that enabled the formation of community housing funds for the specific area known as the Peconic Bay region. Jill has been a town board member in Southold since 2011, I believe, and has been active in the community for way longer than that. And they were doing some really interesting things. She's been very gracious with her time and offering us some of their insights and experiences, which I want to give us some. I heard Adam's comments. I worked in Albany for 20 years, those halls, and you talk about dog years. A lot of things happen in June. And people who are resistant sometimes change their minds, particularly when appropriate pressure can be applied. So, Jill, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I was at the last meeting you had, so I know Adam covered a lot of stuff, which is basically the same stuff that's happening in every town. We're a population from our 2020 census, about 23,000. COVID hit, we have more people out here now. We have had the 2% land transfer tax out east, meaning the Suffolk County towns, for quite a while. So former Assemblyman Thiel came up with a bill to add 0.5%. The local paper said 2%, but it's 0.5%. So now the transfer tax, real estate transfer tax is 2.5%. So the 2% continues to go into land for development rights. And then the 5% goes in, you know, 0.5% goes in for our housing. So I'll go through these slides quickly because a lot of this stuff is stuff you covered, but you guys have it. So if anybody wants to take it and look at it slowly. So we developed part of the statute of, so here's our housing chapter and our goals. So it's create affordable housing. So, and promote awareness about housing issues, retain residents, housing, protect quality of life, and develop best practices. Next slide. And then and afford, you know, various opportunities to various individuals and families. And you can keep going on the slide. So this is the variable that, you know, you guys talk about, because you have affordable housing, which, and then we try to use different terms because everybody's, you know, conditioned to think when you hear affordable housing, you think Section 8. It's really not. It's, you know, so we try to use different definitions: affordable housing, community housing, attainable housing. And you can read the different, you know, that's a lot of money that people make. I don't make that much money, but, you know, it's, you know, so it's, but they're still struggling. So next slide. You know, and you got to do all different types of housing, and because there's so many different types of needs. And it also, we're mostly a single family, single resident community. And so we're struggling with doing those, you know, apartment complexes and things like that. And we want the smaller boutique ones. Next slide. And here's another one. I'll let you guys read it instead of me reading through it, but that's just how we progressed to get to where we are. We basically already, like I said, we already had the 2%. We had to do a voter referendum, and it passed overwhelmingly. There was pushback, you know, because it's all not more taxes and blah, blah, blah. But we've preserved over 10,000 acres in our small town with our community housing fund. So people have seen that successful plan work. So they knew the model of the 0.5% would work also. The problem is we didn't have a housing plan. So that was our next step. So it took us 8 months, and the statute talked about exactly how we had to do it. We had to have community people in our working group, in our community advisory housing group. We had, you know, banker, real estate, construction, you know, so the state statute told us what we have to do. So we worked on that for 8 months with this group, with a consultant and our planners. Next slide. Yeah, so this just talks about the community housing fund a little more. Next slide. You know, and you know who it benefits. It doesn't just benefit the person who needs the house. It benefits the small mom and pop stores that can't find workforce, you know, the workforce. We have about 80%. We're the last town on Long Island on the North Shore, and we have about 80% of our workforce drive into our town from other towns every day because they can't find affordable housing in our town. The next town over, west of us, Riverhead, is a lot larger, and it has different variations. It's got a lot of apartment buildings and they can go higher. We only go 3 stories. So there's a lot more choices. So a lot of people had to move out of town, move into neighboring towns, and they drive, and they still, because we have we have a hospital and 2 nursing homes. So we have, you know, and then of course all the schools and everything. So it's, when you think about housing for people, you're not thinking of that particular family. You're thinking it really reaches everybody in the community because they volunteer for our fire departments. They maybe volunteer at our schools, our hospitals. You know, they you know, have their kids go to school. So now maybe the parent is a Girl Scout leader or something like that. So it's just, it brings in the whole community. So it really benefits everybody. Next slide. Yeah, so that's just what I'm talking about. You can go next slide. You know, and most of, you know, this is just some stuff from, you know, 2020. You know, most people are cost burden, which means that you're spending more than 30% of your income on mortgage or rent. And that's a fact all over the country. So next slide. You know, and then here's, you know, this is in your community too. Our housing, our lowest really house is 604,000, and it goes up from there. And you're talking to people with a median income of 87,000. There's no way they can come up with a down payment big enough and afford that. So, and that's in your area too, I'm sure. Next slide. So yeah, there's the balance, and it's, so you got to really think of all the different ways you can do housing. Next slide. Yeah, so if there's less, you know, people complain about traffic if you're building something, and what it's going to do. But like I explained, 80% of the workforce is driving in. If we have somebody that, say, lives down the road from the nursing home, they can walk to work. You know, or either, you know, so it brings more traffic in if you don't have enough housing. So there's that argument there too. Next slide. You know, and you want a mixture of housing types, because it gives that diversity and makes that community better. But at the same time, you know, we have a quaint, like New England type of style here. So we want to make sure we keep that style. We don't have an architectural we have an architectural committee for commercial properties, but we don't have one for residential. But when we're developing affordable housing communities, when a developer comes in, we ask them the questions like, what is your style of it and everything. So that's another thing you know, because you don't want it to change the character of the community that much, but you want the diversity. Next slide. So yeah, I went ahead of myself there. Next slide. And you know, so this is basically our plan. And, you know, you do a needs assessment. We did a survey to find out, you know, we have about 700 people on our list that have been on there for years because we haven't really done anything. And we did a needs assessment of what they needed, and they're all different types of families. And a lot of people said they wanted rentals right now. Some people said, oh, I need a 3-bedroom. I need a 2-bedroom. I need, you know, I need a house. I need, you know, so that was really good because it made this working group really think outside the box. So now we have our plan and we have the framework for the plan. Now it's up to the town board to put the wheels on that framework. And that's what we're doing. And our first thing we're doing is subsidies for contractors. So we have a 12-unit repurpose going on now. And we're starting, each unit will get 55,000 because they're making it affordable in perpetuity. And then we have a whole list. So for repurpose, you get another percentage because we want people to repurpose old buildings instead of build new. And then you're using green energy, will give you another percentage. So this gentleman, I think he's getting, I forgot how many, but he's getting 1 point something million from us for the 12 units. And basically what we're going to do is say, okay, once you have your ready for your building, once you have your building permit, you give us a bond for the amount, and then we're going to give you the money. That, and then when the CO is granted on the project, when it's completed, we'll release the bond. So if the contractor somehow doesn't finish the project, we get all our money back. So that's very important to keep the to keep it sustainable. We also have like low interest loans. We're doing things like our sanitary flow credits. We have a bank because of our land bank that we have. And we just changed the code that if it's for affordable housing, you get them for free. Otherwise, if it's just regular construction, you have to pay for them. Next slide. I don't know how much is left here. Yeah, so now we're on the solutions, and next slide. Yeah, so here's just, you know, our goals. You know, so you got to really think through all these different goals as you're developing your plan. And, you know, and there's so many different ways that you can do subsidies. We have another project that the town owns the property. We're going to do the subdivision because we want half the property. It's right next to our recreation area. We want half the property to build a indoor recreation area, and the other half will be 22 individual houses for sale. And so we're working out the logistics. We did the RFP. We have a contractor who does affordable housing all over the county, Nassau and Suffolk. So he knows how to crunch the numbers. He knows what works for him. And we could put more on this property, but we wanted as low density, but also, you know, so he's building the least amount for him to make a little bit of money. And then when he's done building, then he's out of the project. And then we will have, you know, each individual homeowner will have a contract, and they won't be able, like if they wanted to, they have to come for permission to, like, say, finish their basement or something like that. And they're not going, and they can only get a certain amount of equity out of that. And so when they sell it, it will keep it affordable. There's a lot more logistics to that I made it sound simple, but yeah. So next slide. I don't know how many slides are left here. The next slide.
1 to 2 minutes left, Jill.
Okay. Let's see. I think that's about it, really. It's, you know, let's see. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And you know, we are struggling right now. We're hiring a housing person because we don't have that department, and our planners can't continually do this because they're doing all the other regular planning things. And by the way, one of our planners is the one that made this slide. So we have very talented planners. So once we get that person up and running, they can work with our Housing Advisory Commission, which is all volunteers that does a lot of work, and they can help do outreach work and marketing and, you know, have forums like you guys are having to teach people what our housing plan is like. And the other thing you have to realize is you have to be flexible in your plan, because times changed. I mean, we all went through a big change the last 5 years of things we never thought would happen. So just have that in mind, that you be flexible in that. But there's so many different ways, and back to this one, the land that we own. So the contractor's going to develop the roads, put the water main in and the sewer in, and he's going to give us a cost of what that is. And we can take that cost off the sale of the property. So if that's going to cost them $150,000 and we're selling the property to him $300,000, then we can sell the property to him for $150,000. That way, we're not taking that $150,000 out of our fund, and he's getting the subsidies that help him reach his goals. So that's where we're at now. The next step, once we adopt that, will be to work on subsidies for individuals for rental. We can do a down payment for rentals and, you know, and then a sliding scale. If you stay there long enough, you don't have to pay it back. If you leave within a certain amount of time, you have to pay that back, that kind of thing. And we do zero interest loans, down payment assistance. There's all those different things that now we have to work out the policies for. So that's where we're at. And I've been working on this diligently for 3 years. So it's taken us 3 years to get to this point. So there's no easy answers, but, you know, the community, you can do it. I don't, you know, if you have that, people are going to complain about any change and any more money you take out of their pocket. But I believe that this is the least hurtful way to do it in the real estate transfer tax. And we're thinking, we have about 3 million, maybe over 3 million. We haven't gotten the quarterly from this year yet from the county. So we're probably closer to 4 million, but you got to make sure, I mean, it's going to build over time, and you got to make sure that you do things that bring money back into it, you know, like the loans, and people have to pay it back and stuff. So, yeah, it's complicated, but it's working. We have two other projects in the queue that, you know, people are coming forward. And then we have another project that somebody was doing a six apartments. And during his process in the planning board, which takes, you know, a long time, years, he said, hey, what if I do three market rate and 3 affordable? And the planning board said, sure. So just from all this talk in the community, it made him start thinking about that. And he was like halfway through planning his project, and he was able to figure out that he can do 3 affordable apartments and still make his money. So you know, the more you do these community meetings, the better. The more educated people get, the more, you know, they want to help.
Hey, Jill, just quick, logistically, that staff member you have to hire who's going to essentially manage this big brand new program for the town. Are you paying that staff member out of the proceeds from the real estate transfer tax, or is that going to be a regular employee of the town?
No, I wanted to do half and half because our funds are new and it's small, but I have some resistance on the town board that doesn't even want to hire a housing person that's kind of ran on housing, but yet is hesitant on everything. So we agreed to pay this person out of the housing fund.
Jill, how long did it take you said you had 4 million. Is that just the housing fund? How long did it take?
That's just the housing fund. And we started collecting in 2022, end of 22, I think. Yeah, and real estate kind of slowed down. We predicted about $1 million a year we would make. It was like maybe 2 million a year, but maybe about $1.5 million a year we would add to the fund. And, you know, and real estate has slowed down. Too bad we couldn't start it before when COVID was here, because that's when everything flipped, and that's when our normal houses that were 600,000 and 700,000 went to 1.2 million. But we, you know, now they're down a little bit, but not much.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you,
Jill.
Thank you. Jill, in addition to the community housing fund, was there anything else you're doing down there that might be of interest? Like in terms of housing and zoning?
Yeah, well, we're actually revamping all our zoning right now. So it's chaotic and it's in the public now. And we're starting Monday for our meetings, our roundtable meetings, to explain that. And that's going to probably be another year before we get that approved. We do have in our code that, and we've had it for a while in our subdivision code, if you do 6 lots or more, you know, a certain percentage had to be affordable. And then if you didn't want to make it affordable, you could buy that out. So we do have another fund that has $1 million in it right now. But because our housing crisis is so bad, we just changed that code to make it mandatory. So you have to do one at affordable. If you're going to do you can do all the other ones at market rate, and then you have to do the affordable, and it's based on percentages. So that helps a little. And we're trying to get our economic development committee to engage the schools and have job fairs, and trying to get our local businesses to do internships for these kids, so we get people to realize what it's like to work in your own community, and hopefully we can get some of these kids to stay around.
Thank you, Jill. Also thank you, Jan and Adam, for coming today. I feel like we could do a 5-hour event so that we could hear more and ask more questions. What I'd like to do is turn it over to our Housing Advisory Committee quickly, and then we want to close with getting some feedback from participants before everyone leaves today. So,
Well, briefly, we've been meeting for 2 years and we're slowly getting our sea legs. We've learned about state programs, the Pro Housing Program, the county Housing Smart programs. But locally, when we started researching the rental market here, which practically doesn't exist, our first recommendation back to the town was to limit non-owner occupied short-term rentals. And we're trying to keep an eye on that because it's really been catastrophic for young people in particular looking for places. On the positive side, we are promoting ADUs, which many of you may know about, accessible dwelling units, which can be built on your property regardless of the size, as long as you follow setbacks and so forth. You can add a small apartment to your existing house. You can renovate a garage, put it on the second floor of a garage. You can do a separate unit. There is going to be, we hope, some county money available for lower income owners to help them build such a unit. If so, you would rent it at an affordable rate for a certain amount of time. But ADUs are one solution that is available, and we'll be happy to talk to people more about that if anyone is interested.
Claire's
Now,
modeling example.
in our research, we realized we needed forums like this. We have to know what everyone is thinking and what you think would be the best solutions, or at least a few of areas to go forward in. And we started a questionnaire at Heritage Day, and I'll just give you briefly some of the responses. The people who responded, 80% have lived here for more than 10 years, 60% are married, and 40% live with a senior citizen at least. What they said, and you could check more than one box, 74% asked for senior housing. We don't have any, They also, 74% suggested apartments to rent. 55% suggested multifamily units, and 40% suggested rehabbing existing housing of wherever it is, okay? Then at our meeting on Sunday, the 27th, let's see what, we had a whiteboard like we had tonight, and basically it was evenly split between senior housing, new single family, and rehabbing existing structures. I mean, it's just all three would be favorably viewed by everyone. Now, tonight it looks like senior housing and rehab is a little bit ahead, but you can see from the board that there's interest in many areas, and being a senior at this point, I hope I don't have to move out of the area if we could do some senior housing someday. We are looking, we've spent a lot of time developing the possibility on a local level of our community housing fund. Although Adams put a little realism into the project, we are absolutely inspired by what has happened out on Long Island, and we're going to keep pushing, even if it takes a few years. I mean, we'll see. We're also very inspired by Pine Hill. We've been looking at towns in the area. What Woodstock is doing, New Paltz has some senior housing. It's amazing what's going on, and we've actually thought about inviting housing people from other towns here so that we just percolate every possible idea. That's it for now, but.
Can I just, can I say two things?
For sale too, because that would be, everyone knows the Granite, it's sitting there, it's a lot of land. We could do senior housing, we could do workforce housing, we could have a daycare center, and goodness knows we could have a grocery. Wouldn't that be cool? So.
Affordable.
Really.
Jill?
Yeah, I just want to say two quick things. Yeah, we're doing all those things that you mentioned in your housing, so keep up the good work, and please reach out to us with any questions you have. You can either reach out to me, Ken has my information, or our planning staff at Southold Town Hall Planning. It's on our website, and we have a great housing commission also that is really passionate about everything. So instead of you reinventing the wheel on some stuff, if we're a little ahead, please reach out to us. And, Ken has a lot of our information already that I hope he shares with you. And please, our housing plan is 81 pages. It's easy to read through, so copy whatever you want.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So,
I would like to add one more suggestion. I think it'd be interesting to do a field trip to go out and look at local workforce housing that has been developed, so that people have a picture in their minds of what it looks like when it's done. You can do the same with senior housing, but I think there's a lot of prejudice about it and confusion. And I think that if the housing group really can sort of support a field trip to look at this kind of housing, it might be a really useful thing to do, in addition to having people come to you.
Thank you, Jen. So I wanted to, I was gonna threaten to lock the door and not let anyone leave until we hear from you. So I wanted to open the floor right now and just hear, is there something that you heard tonight, which is a solution that you would like the town to consider, or something that you heard tonight that you want to see happen, whether it's more of these investigatory activities or a solution that you want us to pursue? Yes.
I think clarification, I'm unsure what I heard about Southold. Do they have a combined housing and
They have
preservation?
both,
Yes.
It's together, it's one committee and it's one.
No, it's separate.
No,
They're both.
separate.
Committee and.
Yes.
Okay.
The only thing that combines it is it's all received from the transfer tax. It goes into separate funds. Matter of fact, when we first started the 0.5%, the Suffolk County Controller had to ask the Assemblyman, how do I give these funds back to the towns? Because, the county collects all your taxes. So it's totally separate. He couldn't give it back from the same funds that he gave our land transfer 2%. So it's the same program, but it has to be totally separate. If that makes any sense.
Quick question, is that tax able to be mortgageable? Can someone lump that into their mortgage if the buyer? Or is that something they have to pay at closing?
That's I believe it's at closing, and it's anything above $200,000, I think, something like that. Yeah, it's just part of the closing.
I'm not from here, so I'm not gonna offer any solutions, but I did wanna just offer a bit of a lens that a lot of times, when we talk the housing crisis, it's like this giant morass of a problem with 1,000 different pieces inside of it. But I find that a lot of times when you look across the country and a lot of different communities, there's kind of two core items at the center of it. One that's nationwide and one that only some communities face. And we here in Ulster County, we have both problems. The nationwide problem is that wages have not kept up with the cost of housing. The cost to build or maintain any house in the country has increased dramatically over the last quite a few years. And the wages of the bottom 20% of workers have not risen at anything near that rate. That's a problem, and that is an enormous part of the housing crisis. I would encourage when you look at solutions and when you look at problems that you kind of like separate that out a little bit as a really distinct pillar of the crisis, because some parts of the problem and some solutions are kind of directly address the issue of the fact that people don't make enough money to live in housing. That's an enormous problem. Now, the problem that exists everywhere. There's not a place in the country where that problem doesn't exist. Now, the problem that certain areas face much more intensely is the demand problem. We live in an incredibly high demand place. And so regardless of people's ability to earn money to just carry forwards the repair cost of a home or the maintenance cost of a home, demand for homes is so high here that we have a dramatic disparate number between the supply of homes available and the people that want to buy and live in them. And so some solutions are gonna be dramatically impacting our supply of homes, and some are gonna be subsidizing parts of homes. And those problems are interrelated incredibly, but they're also distinct solutions and kind of pillars of this larger problem. And I would just say that, like, when we talk about the Housing Action Fund, and we talk about most subsidies, they're broadly going to be focused on the problem of people being unable to afford housing based because their income is not high enough. But we have this other problem also, just like there is an incredible demand for housing, and we have to increase the overall supply also on top of focusing on subsidies. Both problems exist here, both solutions will be needed here. But as you look at like the problems and the options available to you, I would just encourage you to kind of like think about which lens you're looking through.
I was about to say, that's very well explained, and it happens to be one of the slides I skipped on my deck. Here in Ulster, it's actually the bottom 40% of our earners that haven't seen their wages move relative to inflation. So that means we cast our struggle net a little wider, and then it includes people like grocery store workers and certified nurses assistants and people who like play a really key role in delivering goods and services in our community that are, you know, dealing with that same wage stagnation, housing inflation, you know, imbalance.
We didn't plan that.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
Charlie?
Yeah, in addressing that very situation that you are talking about, I understand, educated wise, how that plays out and the need and how they're two separate and disparate. But I think that as far as like the question was, what would I like to see the committee do? I think that it's a very small town. It takes a lot of time to develop and everything. And I think that the immediate disparity in our town, in our county, is people with those low wages that we're talking about needing homes. And not that I don't really care about the really rich people buying these millions, but as far as I'm concerned, maybe they could look elsewhere, because I mean, basically, if the economy in the region is going to grow, it's going to grow with the people that we keep here, the younger people, or else we're just going to gentrify a little town like Accord and just have all these, city people come in. So the immediate emergency, I think, is for people who need homes, who work here, and people we want to keep here. I think that there needs to be some kind of plan, and in addressing that, I think the community would like to see the committee already have some kind of plan or development that they could actually, wrap their teeth in to see what you were talking about. Like, what does it look like? And then have a referendum, like say, well, this is what it's going to possibly look like, and this is how we're going to fund it. Like, maybe get people to buy the granite, you know what I mean? Or, stuff like that. Whereas like, exactly. But so basically it's just saying, I think we have a more immediate need of addressing the lower income wage affordability of rentals.
I guess I like what you mentioned about properties or homes that are in disrepair, that are abandoned. We have so many of those. And me, from my liking things to look pretty, there's a double thing there. I love that idea of trying to take some of those. Just in this town alone, there's so many, and it's so sad, So I don't know what's being done about that, but to me, that seems like a double win to look into that.
That's why when we did our subsidies, we added a higher percentage if you're repurposing a house. Because we have some of them here also, and then that kind of gives a little incentive to say, hey, maybe I'll buy that house if I'm going to get a little more subsidy to help me work it. Because sometimes when you're rehabbing a house, it costs more than if you're building it from the ground up.
Yeah, just from environmental, like if there's like types of things like that that come across me, for instance, my house, we knew we were gonna have to gut it and renovate it, but we didn't know the foundation was bad, which was an extra 60,000, and we had to jack up the house and, you know, re-concrete it, and it's still not sealed, and I had to install a sub pump our first winter after our first heavy rainstorm. So there's always unexpected costs when you're rehabbing opposed to doing a fresh, you know, ground up project. But as far as us doing something about the rehabbing of properties in town, I know myself, I've been concerned and wanted something to be done. We have a lot of abandoned bungalow colonies, things like that, that were only 3-season or 2-season, short-term, transient properties. That really, I want to figure out a way for us to do it in the zoning code to offer some type of density bonus, things like that for it. That being said, I'm at the end of my first term and I do not have time for the rest of the year to do any zoning code edits. But it is something that I hope the board and whoever gets reelected next year at the end of the year continues. But I know that we've, as a board, talked about going over that. We just updated the zoning code last year after 16, how many years did it take us?
5.
I bet ZRC, the start of
2017.
2017, I couldn't remember, they always give, I was only there for 2 years of it, but started almost 6 years ago, process of updating the zoning code from a zoning review committee's suggestions to us that were done then, which were done with a lot of conservation and environmental goggles on, like we talk about those different views. So there was not a lot, the little bit of housing that got put in there, for some bonuses was, some of it was strong-armed, yourself personally and other things. We do have some density bonuses for instances, like we have an affordable housing density bonus for that's about based on the number of units that we had put in there, but we've said since adopting those revisions that we do want to do another pass with housing goggles on of the entire, like of the zoning code and of those chapters that we can.
I just want to underscore what you said. I'm talking about really focusing on the properties that are too far gone to be rehabbed.
Right, I mean,
And that
yeah,
are by
that's what I
true
was thinking.
neglect. Some of them are either probably in foreclosure or headed toward foreclosure when the county comes into ownership with them.
Right.
Unfortunately, there's a recent Supreme Court decision that now kind of puts some handcuffs on what you can do quickly with those. But there are an increasing number of communities that are getting control of those properties in some way or shape or form. Now you have an opportunity to get off the bench because you have a domino in your hand that you can play. And you can put an RFEI or an RFQ out into the development world and say, we know that our town needs X, Y, and Z. Our comp plan says we should pursue X, Y, and Z. We're going to entertain development proposals to do that on this parcel that we control and bring you in an interview. You interview developers who, you know, are credible to deliver that project on behalf of the community and its people. We're seeing more places do this and they're getting aggressive in the ways that they do it. It's tougher in a smaller town.
Right, but I wonder if the housing committee has identified, like, it'd be good to start small, you know, pick one that you know would be not too big of a deal to do. You know, and start and see about getting people interested.
Yeah, so we're in the middle of that process right now with the housing committee. Marty kind of touched base on it a little. We're in the middle of a consult with Hack and Pace, and they're doing a housing site inventory for 2 corridors that the housing committee has selected after some vigorous mapping and vetting on the different corridors. We broke the town up into 9 different corridors. They we ended up picking 2 where we saw the most potential for housing development. Those got a deeper analysis, and now in the process, we're at the spot where we get to do a design charrette on a selected property. So we're kind of in the process of kind of in the middle of that, but without anything official to put out yet, but we're working on it. So we do have, that will be out soon, the results from that study, so that we can see what properties were identified as potential or not and had the most. So we have at least 2 areas of town. The one was this kind of Lucas 209, the triangle between Lucas 209 and Kaiserreich Road, if you were to go in a triangle driving it, and then also like coming down Samsonville and then turning to the left, going towards our side of town on 209. So there's two different completely opposite sides of town views to see about housing potential. So we have that coming soon. That portion just got finished, and then we're starting the design charrette shortly after that and picking ours.
Is the charrette gonna be the subject of a property you have control of?
We don't have control over any property that's buildable on, well, with the town, we might some, but not for a housing structure, not anywhere large enough, definitely not the minimum of 3 acres for the guides we were given for looking. We don't have a lot of town municipal owned land.
It's for sale though.
It's for sale though. If anyone wants to buy it at the county, us to not have to deal with that part. But so we have.
That's where you can do a partnership, you know, where the town can partner with,
yes,
you know, a builder, kind of like what we're doing, because you don't want to get into the housing business, so to speak.
No, we
and
don't.
Start managing. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. We don't want to be, I know I don't want to be a landlord. I don't think that the town board wants business to be a landlord and owning it, but I think that we want to find a solution and try to help with that. And so we're doing this, so it's the charrettes, we have yet to get a finalized stamped, yes, this is the one we're doing yet. It's a consult that we've gotten through. The funding for this came through the Ulster County Housing Smarts Community action. I'm forgetting our full name, sorry guys, I haven't. But came through the county's housing action fund.
No,
I'm gonna
Ulster
visit
County
communities.
Housing Smart
Thank
Communities.
you. I can't do it. Yeah, my brain's done for the day. But there, we applied to get our site analysis, which is one of the check marks, like benchmarks for being one of those communities off our list. The county approved it. We did an RFP to bid for this process, and then we picked 2, and now we're at the end of that. So this is county sponsored. So we're working with the county on it. So I don't have an official yes on where that is yet. We're in debates.
We had a hand up.
Oh, I had 2 questions. I think the first one got answered, which it seemed like the rehabbing is is low hanging fruit while you're working on longer term projects. The other question was, the point was made that there's a shortage of builders. And that you can have all these plans, but no one's there to build. And I wondered if there's potential, or if the county's already working on stuff to do partnerships with maybe the vocational school or you know, other sources of apprenticeship.
I don't think we can speak for the county, but I'm speaking from experience.
I'm gonna speak for the county.
No, yeah.
That I can do.
Okay,
It's a big problem, and it's a big issue that we're working on right now. So I would say there's kind of 2 ends to it. On one hand, we have vocational training, which we're actually quite good at in this county. On the other hand, just because you produce people who can get employed does not mean that we have large enough businesses for them to work at. And so that's sort of like capacity building, getting the smallest builders to be medium-sized builders, and you get a medium-sized builder to be a large builder. That's a pipeline that we're really working on right now. And so there's a problem, you know, that we've identified, and that, you know, we're kind of working to figure out how we can kind of address that issue. I mean, you saw that in the numbers that Adam presented, like, it's a problem. We need people to do the work, and yeah, work on the capacity building. It's a big.
Seems like in an area that would be, you know, a potential use of subsidies. I would encourage that.
Yeah, and how you subsidize a business is a little complicated. You know, a lot of times a direct grant is maybe not the best approach. A lot of times what we're trying to think of is like how to ensure that people know that there's less risk for expanding.
Yeah.
And so if a business is willing to take on a few more workers, how can we ensure that they have the work at some kind of time frame that they're gonna feel comfortable with that?
Yeah.
And so it's all stuff that we're, all the details. Flushing it out though.
Yeah, Godspeed. I was gonna say on that note, as someone who raised in the area, I didn't go to BOCES, but we have a very well-known, very good vocational school in our county that all the school district students get access to. But the problem is they graduate and they have nowhere to live. And they move to somewhere that has maybe
Better
lesser,
wages.
better wages or cheaper rent for less wages, but it's cheaper rent than here and they can't afford here. Like I said, I'm lucky enough to have married someone who bought a house in 2018. That we gutted. Before that, I have no chance of living in this area. I actually wouldn't be able to still hold my title if I didn't marry my husband who happened to buy a house, because I would have had to move out of town and not been a eligible elector of the town and succeed my position at some.
Thanks, Adam.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
Yeah. But yeah, I think let's wrap up this
I think
portion.
one more comment, and then we can, I'll stick, some of us will stick around if.
And we have a comment box too,
Oh,
if you
yes,
wanna
yeah.
say anything on the way out, write anything on the comment box.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the way that we're going about building currently and post World War II, I think the materials that we started to build with were very toxic and weren't built to last for more than 50 to 60 years. So using plywoods with the glues that break down a lot of nails and the insulations that we're using, we've created a real toxic mess in the environment, in our living environments. So I think we really need to address the types of materials that we're using and where we're sourcing the materials from. We have an abundance of materials that we could be using locally, and we should be using locally, and we should be looking to those materials and looking to the younger generation to start learning these methods to build houses that can last for many generations, and we won't have the same problem in 30 years or 40 years.
Why they pick this particular subject?
Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna, thanks everyone for coming. I'm gonna go and stop the share.
Thank you guys.
Thank you. Good luck, everybody.